Welcome to If Prices Could Talk, the podcast where we dive into the art and science of pricing, sales, and negotiation. I'm your host, Tracy Dent. Join me as we explore strategies and current events shaping the future of pricing power in B2B, featuring insights from industry leaders and subject matter experts. Let's jump into today's conversation. First, let me set up a little context for the episode. So we've got Jeet Mukherjee from Holden Advisors. He's our Chief Strategy Officer. And then Greg James, if you have not listened to one of the Greg episodes yet, Greg has been leading engineering teams for 30 years. We thought this would be a really good topic to do with Greg because actually both of you have seen firsthand how these traditional manufacturers grapple with change. So looking at the auto industry, looking at how much it's changing through autonomous vehicles, it was like, all right, let's talk about this together. Let's talk about how the change, first of all, is unfolding and then how we think it's going to continue to unfold. There's so many things to talk about with this one. I think a really good starting place is with Waymo, especially since it's so normal where both of you live now. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I can get us started, and then Greg can jump in here. So Phoenix has done. I'm not sure politically or legally how they did it or when it started, but they did a really good job of inviting these autonomous testers to come into Phoenix. And Phoenix is in a grid pattern, so it's like most of Phoenix is 1 mile east, 1 mile north. Like grids, major roads are. So it's very easy to get started, I think, in a place like this for a software like autonomous. So I think this was a good place. And then the city made it really easy for people to come in. Waymo has been here and doing well by itself on their own platform, not the collaboration with Uber. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit. And Waymo's been doing it for, I don't know, Greg, how many years? It's been like 4 years.
Well, yeah, so Waymo started, I believe it was in 2009, and they've
2000.
actually been doing autonomous vehicle testing in the Phoenix area since I think around 2015.
The fully driverless rides to the public started in October 2020 in Phoenix. But before that, it
2020,
looks
okay.
like, yeah, early rider program in the Metro Phoenix area was in 2017. So
Okay.
still pretty new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I will tell you, I mean, it's pretty, I've driven it a few times. My son, Aiden, he lives in Tempe, which is in the heart of the Waymo sort of place. So he's able to take it to Scottsdale or Phoenix or wherever he's meeting up with his buddies. And he's taken it many times. And it's just a way of his normal sort of weekends now. So it's not really much of a behavior change. For me, I've only done it 4 times, 4 or 5 times. So just a handful of times. And I absolutely love it. I don't like the fact that it's not on a freeway, but besides because there's a time limitation that's there. But besides that, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and I'm very new to it. So yeah, Jeet was sharing that we had this couple's date night a few weeks ago, it was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that was my first time trying Waymo. So I was going into it kind of with a lot of anticipation, right? I've seen them around. You see them everywhere in the Phoenix area. And so you see this car going by without a driver behind the wheel. And it is very strange visually. And so you imagine trying to get in, imagine getting into that vehicle. And it's like, little pause, little hesitation, seems interesting, but I'm not sure. So this night we decided to try it out. It was a good opportunity for us to test it, for me to experience it. And booking the car was very much like booking an Uber or Lyft. The app that they have, the Waymo, I think Waymo One app, very similar layout, very similar process. So that was nice. No surprises there. And it gives you a ETA for the car. The car came right on schedule, came out in front, had my initials on the roof, the little roof light. So it was very clear to see it was my car. And the four of us got in, and I got in the front seat. And of course, there's no one next to you, which is very strange. Once we were buckled in, the car kind of sensed it. And it just very smoothly pulled out. There were a few announcements like welcome, and then they had some nice music going. But then it pulled away. Very comfortable ride, and we were on our way. quite honestly, from that point on, the only thing that was different from any other ride I've ever taken is there was no human in the driver's seat. That's the only difference. The way the car navigated traffic, we've all had this experience where we're kind of sitting in the car, like we're sitting in an Uber or a taxi or something, and we kind of have an idea of what traffic decisions we would make, what maneuvers we make would make in a situation coming up. For the most part, the car was kind of doing what I would expect any driver to do. So it
Yeah.
was behaving very normally, navigating very kind of predictably in a way, and got us there, no problem. We got out, car pulled away, and we were off to the concert. And of course, it's a very easy experience because we don't have to worry about parking or anything like that. The entire experience was very pleasant and surprisingly unremarkable. That was the biggest surprise for me because again, going in, I thought it would be kind of weird without a driver behind the wheel. But as far as the ride itself, if you weren't looking over to the driver's seat, it'd be like just any other ride.
It's so crazy how fast it got normal for you. This was my first, we were in Austin, Jeet and I were in Austin for a conference last week, and that was my first time seeing one at all. Couldn't believe that we were seeing one in real life. And then it felt like they were constant, and they kind of were. So the other thing that I saw was in Austin, and theirs are all have to be ordered through the Uber app, but in Austin, it's one in every five Ubers is a Waymo. That
Wow.
was kind of crazy to me. They just launched in Austin in March of this year
Mhm.
to the general public.
So
So it's pretty
20% of their
fast.
capacity is now driverless cars
Uber.
in
Mm-hmm.
Austin.
Mm-hmm. In Austin.
Wow.
I know.
Huh. Yeah, I wonder what the capacity is here, or the percentage here. There are a lot of them here, but as Jeet said, Waymo has taken a strategy to kind of limit their coverage to, I guess, areas that have greater rider density. I think the intent is to sort of minimize the average wait times for the customer, so they have a more pleasant experience. But it'll be interesting to see how, if and how they expand coverage to more of the less dense areas like where Jeet and I live, where there's still customers, but there's not a lot of us per square mile. So how do you deploy your fleet in order to minimize wait times, but still, not have to have too many cars idling?
Yeah. There's so many domino impacts to this kind of change, which is why we wanted to do this episode in this way. Given your experience leading engineering teams, you've got such big change, Verizon, Google, Intel. Like, how do you were using the term entropy, like, how do you deal with other implications of this kind of change? So I think it's a really cool thing to kind of unpack because there's implications for the car manufacturers. There's implications for the people in the front lines of the innovation, the Uber drivers, consumers, public trust. There's so many layers to it. So I thought for this episode we could go through kind of the positives that we're seeing for the future. Some of the negatives are what people seem to be concerned about from a systemic perspective and for the businesses and everything like that. And then sort of those impacts of change and what it means for the dynamics of the people in the value chain, all the
Mhm.
different pieces, and see how much we can cover in this and how we think it'll play out. I think there's just so much to unpack with this. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. I was thinking of maybe we start with some of the positives, and I was trying to pull up
Mhm.
some of the research that I had shared with you because I wanted to talk to the stat about
Yeah.
safety.
Mm.
I found a few also. So if you have an issue with it, I can read some of mine.
Yeah, go ahead.
This was through Waymo. They said that impaired driving causes approximately one third of road fatalities today. So
Mm.
that was a potential huge benefit of these autonomous taxis, right? You don't have people on the road that are sleepy, distracted, drunk, all of the different ways that people can not be on their best driving performance. And a third of road fatalities, like if you eliminate that or at least significantly reduce it, there's big numbers behind that. The other thing that was really interesting was congestion, which I hadn't thought about much. So this the research that I was reading was talking about how much more closely the cars can reliably kind of stack up. So the reduction of congestion is 60% on highways when we get to that point with the fleets.
Mhm.
And then the congestion, then you're dealing with less traffic. People are getting there faster. Obviously, they can multitask. It's less on the environment, especially since a lot of these are EVs. So, and also people are individually more productive, which is kind of like way less on the on like the bigger picture impact, but also interesting. You know, if you think about people that commute to work every day and they lose 45 minutes twice because they're driving. So, those were just some top line things that I saw.
Yeah, that congestion one is interesting because you can understand if it was, say, just autonomous vehicles on the road, and they're able to communicate to each other in real time at high speeds, then they can follow each other very closely,
Yeah.
because there's no surprises, so to speak. We have to, when we're driving, we have to, they recommend we keep like a 2 second distance to the car in front of us. And that's simply to allow us enough time to react to some change in front of us.
Hmm.
Whereas an autonomous vehicle is, first, they're able to communicate to each other. If the one in front spots some change in condition, boom, instantly all the ones in the chain know. And there's no issue with reaction time. So they can get very close. So the capacity of the roadways, in theory, goes up significantly, like you said.
On that traffic thing, I do think it's phenomenal because it is a great stat and an important one because from a person that hates traffic, just can't stand it.
Eight.
Yeah, it's a big word. It's strong. It's one of those things where, they say, when people have done traffic pattern studies, they always talk about if everybody kind of went at the same speed, that traffic congestion would disappear by like 40%, some huge number, right?
Yeah.
So what Greg just said, being able to chat, by the way, cars being able to talk to each other, not just on Uber platform only or Waymo only, they'll be able to do it across multiple platforms. So if we had like different branded cars, they're still going to be able to talk to each other. And that's still going to be one of the benefits, by the way. So even if you had the same volume of cars on the road as you do today, and everything is autonomous, you would still get that reduction in traffic. And that to me is really amazing. So you're not, there's obviously a reduction in traffic by taking some volume of vehicles out, but you don't necessarily need to do that in this situation. You can have the same volume of vehicles driving, everybody in that car, one person at a time. You could do everything you're doing now, and you would still see less congestion because of what Greg just said, which I find
That's right.
to be a huge benefit. Huge benefit.
So the engineer in me gets kind of excited when I think about this, because there's a couple of paths that you can take. One is, um, you can you can reduce the amount of roadway necessary to support that volume of traffic. So think about the amount of space that we allocate to roadways and the expense of maintaining that. Now we can recover that area, and we can reallocate the maintenance costs to other things in our society. So the opportunities, just from the ability to reduce congestion due to the cars being able to communicate to each other in real time, having instant response to changes in condition and those kinds of things, that benefit translates to, we don't need as many roads. Interesting. And we can still get to where we want to go at the same at efficiently.
Yeah. The
So
other,
that's
but
pretty.
on that same cost front, Greg, is one of my favorites, which is less parking lots needed in downtown areas. So you can reallocate that space for, you can make gardens, you can make parks, you can make, other value add for humanity things in downtown areas where there's a cluster of humans that are there because you just don't need that many parking spaces anymore.
Yeah, actually, let's expand on that a little bit, because I was reading one study, and Tracer, we'll probably have to find some of the citations and include them in
I'll put them
the
in
show
there.
notes or
Yeah.
something. But the estimate was something like the average automobile, say privately owned automobile, is idle 95% of the time. It's parked somewhere. So it's either parked in the garage or it's parked in a parking lot. You're at work and it's out there sitting in the parking lot. You're shopping and it's parking while you're there or whatever. But it's basically not being used 95% of the time. And so
It
that,
is, by the way, it is one of the largest expenses we have as humans and the least utilized to go
yeah,
with that 95. So the expense is high. It's not like it's $10 and we don't use it, 95% of the time. It's a high capital expenditure for a very low usage.
yeah. What's the average vehicle purchase price now? It's like something in the neighborhood of
60.
$40,000.
It might be even higher. I keep seeing ads for like $150,000 cars. It's insane.
Depends on
It's
what you're
like a
looking for, I
house.
guess.
It's a house. It's crazy.
So yeah, so if you think about 95% of the time, so that suggests that there are a lot more cars out there to get us where we want to go when we want to go there than maybe we need, right? So if you imagine sometime in the future, how far we'll see. Um, but the fleet is all autonomous vehicles, and imagine you can call your digital assistant and say, "Hey, I want to get to the mall by such and such a time." The assistant says, "All right, I will call a car at such and such a time. It'll be here at this time." And the car comes, you get in, it takes you to the mall, right? And
No
so we
parking.
get and no parking. You don't have to worry about parking. So we have the ability to get where we want to when we want to because the infinite flexibility of an autonomous fleet. Um, but we don't need as many cars, right? So that car that drops you off can now go and take someone else to where they need to go, and then someone else to where they need to go. And it may happen that the same car comes and picks you up after you're done shopping, but it may be a different one. It doesn't really matter so much. So as far as the function of transportation, thinking about those possibilities from an engineering perspective is kind of exciting. Of course, every solution brings maybe several problems. And, I'm thinking as a car manufacturer, for example, maybe that doesn't sound too exciting because, it's kind of good for maybe my bottom line to produce 95% more cars than are actually necessary to get the function of transportation done. But, I love selling cars. So what does that mean for, the automobile manufacturers?
All right, here's a couple things that I found. Let me just go through, and then I think there's a couple to unpack here. So, impact on the car manufacturers. One is that they are moving from or expanding the B2B model when the heavy focus was on B2C and directly selling to consumers. So that's one thing. Then they're also looking at selling in bulk. So if you think about the partnerships with Waymo and these other companies, how do you figure out how many you're selling and in what business plan for what future, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is they're shifting out of their core competency. I'm gonna do three and then we'll pause because there's so many in here. Third one is shifting out of the core competency from hardware to software, the AI, the sensors, simulation tests, all that kind of stuff is also a big change.
I think one thing to just make a point is I nowadays I believe that making money per car is probably very limited and low. I think most manufacturers make money on finances, financial sort of loans. They make money on the servicing piece of it. They make money in other revenue streams that are a bit more profitable than the car itself. So
Yeah.
as we talk about maybe the commoditization or even the shift away from car to human, I don't think it's theoretically a very large shift, and it is a large shift, but I think we've been moving towards this for a long period of time. So it's not really as big. It's not like they're taking a 70% margin product and going, you're all done and over with. Now you're going to sit in this, 5% margin world. I don't think it's like that. So I think the shift is much easier for the manufacturers than we would theoretically think it is.
Yeah, how do you think that holds as we go up the supply chain? I'm thinking all the suppliers,
Yes.
all the way to
Yes.
raw materials.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a big sort of cascading effect where the
Yes.
sort of the negative impact, if you will, multiplies?
Right, because the manufacturers, so that's the key question in my opinion when you think about manufacturers, because manufacturers have the multiple revenue streams. So they're able to take the same sheet metal and be able to monetize it 4 or 5 different times. And with the new business model changes, they're still going to take the same sheet metal and monetize it for 3, 4 times. So their ability to make money on that sheet metal is still going to be there. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to look a little different, but it's going to be there. The issue is all the suppliers that are providing the sheet metal. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore with the tariffs going in, right? So it doesn't, I don't know what that's going to happen, but those suppliers are going to have a difficult time because they have to their unit of measure is dollar per sheet or it's dollar per unit. And
Mhm.
the units are going to come down. It has to come down. So because the units are going to come down, they're going to struggle. And I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation that's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of attrition that happens. There's going to be some issues at the supplier side. And that might be okay to a certain extent because I don't know if I know Greg knows, but Tracy, I don't know if you know, but there are a lot of small suppliers. It's amazing. It's not like 4 or 5 many car manufacturing suppliers supplies for everyone. It's like thousands. You'll be surprised by how little of a component people make for a car that they have a very healthy business on. So it's going to affect some of that small capacity folks that are out there. I just don't see how they make it through this type of environment or change.
It's almost like when you're at that point of the call it the so the chain of business leading to the solution of transportation. Um, they have an opportunity to shift their revenue, like you talked about. But in order for them to make a transportation device, all of these suppliers are involved. And yeah, I think they are going to go through a very painful transition, um, assuming the sort of the transportation network makes this shift. And let's talk for a second about the shift. All right. So I mentioned earlier that my experience with Waymo was surprisingly unremarkable. It may be that the experience is similar for a lot of people. Once they sort of experience a ride in an autonomous vehicle, they may have some preconceived notions about what that is like. But after the experience, it may be very different, just like it was for me, where it was like, it's actually not different. It's pretty normal. I think I had mentioned in a previous episode about historically the transition from human operated elevators to automatic elevators. And the feeling at that time echoes very much what we're hearing today, where at the time people were very negative, very reluctant to embrace the idea of automated elevators. It was a kind of for lack of a better term, a scary concept. But as more and more people gained experience with it, and as the statistics supported it because of the safety of the automated elevators, they were widely embraced. Fast forward to today, where people can't imagine them not being automated. I would imagine the same kind of transition happening with autonomous vehicles. And at some point, we will hit a tipping point.
I guess that's another weird part of this, right? Is that right now cars are designed for the driver and the driver experience. And then as we move forward with this, are the cars going to be designed for the experience of the back seat?
That's right. And so my question really is right now it makes sense from a behavior change perspective to have the steering wheel go like this automatically and Greg sitting in the passenger seeing the steering wheel turn,
Make it
right?
feel normal, please.
It's
Yeah.
making it normal,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't need
Uh,
to be there. We can have two people, three people sitting in the front, three people sitting in the back, and be perfectly comfortable and fine, and we could be moving forward, right? And so we need some of these things. A car may not look like a car in 5 years, 10 years. So that's another manufacturing boom, right? If there's another way to travel that's going to be a little bit unique and different. And by the way, what makes you think that it should be on the road? It can be Maybe it could be flying. Maybe
Hmm.
it could be other things that are out there that gets us from point A to point B. Because the goal is point A to point B.
That's
It's
right.
the goal isn't a car. It's not autonomous. It's not the word autonomous. It's not the word
Transportation.
car. It's not the word anything, bus. It's just A to B. So the real question is who will be in the field to get humans from A to B the most efficient manner possible.
Yeah, again, looking at this sort of from an engineering perspective, a design perspective, it's interesting. I had forgotten that Waymo vehicles are actually what they call level four. So there's 5 levels of vehicle autonomy, and Waymo's these self-driving vehicles are level four because they still have the ability to be operated by a person, although they are capable of operating fully autonomously. And so a level five vehicle would be one where you don't even need a steering wheel. There is no driver's seat because there would be no need for a human driver. So in that kind of vehicle, now you can talk about allocating the space differently for a different kind of in-vehicle experience. Maybe it's like those family seats on the Southwest Airlines where the seats face each other.
Yeah, that's right.
Now you can, talk
Right.
with your fellow passengers or whatever you want to do. The other interesting thing about this is the I think one of the biggest challenges in design of autonomous vehicles and the AI behind them is the fact that they need to operate in an environment that has a lot of human-driven vehicles in it. Humans, we are somewhat unpredictable in many ways. And so you need the autonomous vehicle to be able to deal with that. And so hence all the sensors. Um, the vehicles still have things like bumpers and all that kind of stuff. If you imagine a possible world in the future where it's just autonomous vehicles, they are communicating with each other real time, and the sort of the driving intelligence is very advanced. What's possible? You start to ask things like bumpers, are they necessary? Well, if there's never a collision, maybe not. So now that's resource, that's weight and a design element that you know don't need in the vehicle anymore. Traffic lights, are those necessary? Well, the vehicles can communicate with each other as they're approaching an intersection. One slows ever so slightly, one speeds ever so slightly. They glide past each other, maybe very close, too close for comfort for humans, but plenty okay for an autonomous vehicle. Stoplights, all those kinds of things. And we already talked about things like parking lots, those go away. So you can imagine a world where if we transition to a world where it's only autonomous vehicles, it could be a very different environment. Um,
Police officers.
well, there's no traffic violations because,
There you go. Which is
That'd
I
be another,
think which
so
is a
now
good thing, right? Because you have these
yes,
humans now they can allocate their
do other
time and
things.
resources to other things,
that's
right?
right.
Which is in my opinion, a very big positive
Right.
that they're not just sitting at the side of the highway waiting for, idiots like me to speed. You know?
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point that I don't hear a lot of discussion about. When you think about how much of our current spending can be reallocated because of the capabilities of something like autonomous vehicle fleet. Um, that'd be an interesting study. Maybe to start digging around. Maybe some people have started to look at it. I am not
Yeah.
aware of any such
Yeah.
study. But it would be interesting to see because So what are the motivations to move toward that kind of future, right? So we already talked about things like freeing up capacity on the roads because autonomous vehicles can follow closer to each other. So so you don't, in theory, need as much road space. Another one, of course, is safety. There's a lot of discussion about that, some debate, but it appears that the data is pretty solid at this point from independent researchers that the autonomous vehicles have demonstrated an impressive safety record. So I was looking at one study with fully autonomous vehicles, a 96% reduction in any injury reported accident, 91% reduction in any airbag deployment. So, significant reductions like that. I can't see the stat right now, but something like 80 some odd percent reduction in any incident resulting in property damage, like a fender bender or other property damage, but significant reductions. So, there would be a strong incentive to move in this direction, because you think about the reduction in cost due to treating injuries, reduction in cost due to repairing damage, things like that. Seems like a strong incentive.
So then what happens with the car repair place that's right down the street from our place,
Yes,
right? 91% is quite a high number. You
that's
know,
huge.
that's a pretty big number. So what happens to these mom and pop repair shops? Because the larger ones, obviously, you would assume
Yeah.
they can go into the maintenance of vehicles or whatever, our transportation devices are. They can kind of go into that maintenance piece of it. So there will be obviously a need of all, for the foreseeable future for anything mechanical to be, fixed, to be serviced, to be taken care of. But you have a lot of mom and pop shops that might not make it through if you have a reduction that high overnight.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it will be an interesting ongoing discussion because it's easy to identify issues like that where we're talking about the known, like there are repair shops around, changing or being impacted. What's more difficult to talk about is the unknown. So we talked about resources being freed up. We don't need as many as much road space, so road maintenance potentially goes down. We don't have to maintain traffic lights or whatever the impact that we want to pick. But what we do with those freed up resources is an unknown. So we can't really talk as concretely about that
Sure.
as we
Yeah.
can about the potential loss. So it makes the overall discussion potentially a little lopsided, where it's easy to argue in favor of holding on to what we know versus embracing something we don't know what it is. So it's
Yeah.
hard to be excited about it, hard to push for it. You know what I mean?
Tracy, this might be a good time to introduce a- obsolete.
New term. Okay.
I
The
see you've
other
been
thing,
practicing.
yes, it's so hard. It just doesn't roll off the tongue. It just doesn't. But
Hey, but once you say it a few times, see,
you get
obsolete,
used to it.
obsolete. See, this is how
Obsolete.
much
Obsolete.
you did.
Got it.
Obsolete. All right, so the earnings report for Uber Q1, the CEO was like, we know we're going to have a lot less Uber drivers on the road moving forward. So what are we going to do with the people? That statement was mostly around they were using some of the people to work on the maps and then also work on improving the algorithm. The other thing I haven't seen much about is support. So I posted something on our TikTok the other day about Waymos in Austin, and my college roommate commented and said she was in a Waymo and it got stuck behind a double parallel parked
Mm,
car, and she had to
mm.
reach out to support. And she's like, it was extremely fast. I got a human. Like I was still in the car. They resolved it. And then I wondered, like, how is the infrastructure of the support system going to be set up, especially since it's probably going to be a mix of bots and people? Because that's got to be really fast. If you're in a Waymo, you have a problem and the Waymo is stuck, there's probably some things that are more urgent than others. So they've got to be really on point with their whole support structure.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing.
Yeah, I think the people kind of leaking over from one activity to the other of support is probably going to be the first half step. And I say half step because I think a lot of support will also get um, you know, um,
Automated.
automated through
Yeah,
This takes
as
AI
us
the
back to
sometimes.
Klarna.
So
That takes us all the way back to
I think
Klarna.
there's a limited window that's there, and that's
Okay.
okay because it's all right to go in steps, right? So you go from this step
Sure.
of no customer support to, oh, we have a little bit of automation. So because we have automation, we're going to put some customer support in there. We're going to make them real live people to go through the behavior change. Makes perfect sense, and that'll last for about 5, 6 years, if not less. And then there's going to be another one that it's going to be all chat or bot driven because they can be very efficient in solving most 99.9%. And so there's probably going to be a little bit of sort of escalation policy so you can still get to a human and then it'll be fully automated. So it will there will definitely be movement. We're feeling it now, and that movement will also probably be temporary in
Yeah.
in the long run, at least.
It's also another place where, like, every time we talk about the AI race through a different lens, it does really feel like there's so many things that are racing so quickly. But this one, especially with some of the early, like in the last 5 years, I think there have been some highly publicized accidents with the autonomous vehicles that like kind of slowed things down over the bigger picture, which could be good to kind of really work up people's trust. But like, think about Klarna when they went way too far with the AI support. I think they laid off like 700 people of their staff and then said they could replace everybody with AI and then kind of walked it back within 3 or 4 months and started hiring people back more in the gig economy way, by the way, which I think is going to be really interesting, where you train people, they can log on for a couple hours, do support, log back off. And I think that's going to be another cool place to see things evolve in this like kind of gig economy context.
It's, for me, the gig economy is really interesting because it's one of those things where I can see how the gig economy would fit into where the gaps are. Let's say it's AI, and AI can do a lot of different things even now, but it has a lot of blind spots. It's got a lot of gaps. So you use gig employees and you fill those gaps. You fill those holes. Makes perfect sense. It's logical. It makes sense. It's really good. It's powerful, and it helps us go to the next stage of our behavior change. What I don't know is in a gig environment, you're hiring a skill set. You're hiring sort of, dollar per minute labor, which is probably the sweet spot for what AI can automate, because you don't own the customer relationship. You don't own IP. You don't own certain things that gives you a little bit more longevity in the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because of that, if you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna type in this form, I'm gonna, automate, I'm just gonna, listen to what your needs are and open up a ticket for you. Those types of work, even though it might be needed right now, I would think that there is a little bit of a expiration date on those types of activities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was curious what it costs to get from A to B. The average cost that automobile owners pay per mile on average. So taking into account depreciation, cost of fuel, maintenance, insurance, all that kind of stuff. And according to AAA, it looks like it's now about 81 cents per mile.
Oh, interesting.
So I thought that was an interesting stat. And so I went back and took a look at the bill for Waymo. And that one came to about $1 per mile.
Hmm.
So that was interesting. They aren't pricing super aggressively compared to just the average cost of owning and driving a vehicle. And of course, cost of owning and driving a vehicle ranges quite widely if you have a luxury SUV versus, a very old used subcompact. The cost
Mm-hmm.
would be a big difference. So I was, wondering if we imagine a future with autonomous vehicles, how would it stretch to reach as much of the market that currently uses cars for transportation, drives cars for transportation.
Yeah.
And according to AAA, the average owner is paying a little over $1,000 a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All
that's
in for a car.
all in.
All in. So depreciation, insurance, maintenance, fuel, all that stuff.
So if you do anything, so if if you're doing any type of Uber or any type of service like that, as long as you're within $1,000 a month, you're fine.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's cheaper.
Yeah,
It's
I guess the one that we don't really feel so much is the depreciation,
yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
But certainly we're all very sensitive to the fuel element, and that's a big swing. And that's one of the reasons why apparently it was going down for a number of years, and then the last few years it started going up.
Yeah.
And fuel prices is a big factor there.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to end up having like basically three? It'll be interesting to see how long this middle space lasts, where we've got CapEx, vehicle, people just buy the thing. You've got the as a service, which I'm still debating, and then the per mile or the Uber or Waymo or whatever. Like those three basically pricing models are going to stay in three buckets pretty substantially for a while.
Can you speak to the second one?
Porsche did this as a service model
Porsche has it.
where
You
you
just
can
call
pay
up
to
and
have it
yeah, deliver.
part-time, basically. And it's
Yeah.
not your car, but you can use the car to a certain extent as frequently as you need.
You
And
have a
it's
mile.
more
I think they have a
ownership.
yeah,
Yeah.
they have a mile limit. They pay for insurance, they pay for everything. And I
Yeah.
think for Porsche, for the lowest package they have a few car models you can get, and I believe it's like a little bit north of 1,000 or 1,600 or something like that per month. And you have so many miles you can use it for, and you basically pick up the car whenever you want, drop off the car whenever you want, and you can switch the types of cars within that category. So it
Mm,
becomes a subscription model to your habit. So you still get to drive it, but you don't have that expensive capacity just sitting in your driveway or in your garage.
I see. And so in exchange for that, you probably pay significantly more per mile,
That's correct.
but you're not tying up a lot of capital.
That's correct. So if I had my fleet of Porsches, it would probably cost me a lot more than $1,000 or $2,000. It'll probably be in the neighborhood of 12, 15,000. But now I can get a little bit of that when I want it and need it in a easier format. Now there's other things like Turo and other apps that are popping up that still allows me to do that at a much lower rate. So I don't
Hmm.
have to go through Porsche to get the vehicle. So I kind of have to go through an individual through Turo to be able to buy or rent when I want to. So I don't have that monthly problem that I have with Porsche either. So there's sort of different levels that you can still opt into that allows you to drive a more expensive car.
Hmm.
Any choices? Well, let's talk
Well,
about people.
one thing that I think we talked about this in a previous episode where the technology is going to displace a large number of workers, a large number of people, but it may not be that, let's say the Uber drivers get displaced to do something else for Uber or related to Uber. They may get displaced and just basically get dispersed throughout the economy. And one thing we talked about earlier is that this transition may have the effect of freeing up resources, capital, to do other things in the economy. And so some of these folks may end up in those areas. It's very difficult to predict what those areas will be, but they may end up there. And we keep in mind that these drivers, besides driving, they have a lot of other talents, and so they can go in a lot of different places. What we do know is they will be displaced if this transition happens. Where they go, very difficult, I think, very difficult to predict, because they can go so many different places. and there may be so many different new opportunities that's hard to predict what those will be. Hmm.
Yeah. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Remember at the very beginning of COVID where all the car manufacturers switched and started making gear for
Yeah.
COVID, like
Yeah.
respirators and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, where it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the crisis that was happening, there's like all this pivoting that happened, but everybody was kind of corralled under this common vision of figuring out how to keep people healthy and safe or try to prevent deaths or whatever. Everybody was kind of in the same frame about it. And this
Yeah.
is so different because it's not like a unified crisis. It is, there's plenty of people who are like spooked about the jobs and everything, but everybody's kind of got their own thing that they care about. And there's so many different segments of people and business and like intention and futures and all that kind of stuff. It's just like so different.
That's a great analogy to use, by the way. I mean, I forgot about how people pivoted, during the time of crisis. I think there is a lot of, when our backs are up against the wall, I think us as humans, we have to persevere. We fight back typically. So I think there will be a lot of, to Greg's point before, I think there will be a lot of opportunities that come up that we don't see now. I think that'll be there, but I can't shake the feeling of with this great, let's say AI. With AI, it's almost like there's this incredible amount of power in our hands, in every individual's hands. So now, if I'm 20 years old and I learn about this power and how to use this power, I can jump over somebody who is 52 years old and has been doing something for 30 years. I can jump that person. I can supplant that person because I have this power. I know how to use it better than this 52-year-old that hasn't learned it yet, right? So these younger folks now have a ladder to be able to get up and over some of these other dinosaurs like myself and get past it. So there's an opportunity that's there that's just the mechanics of it. Then there's also this thought that if I know how to use this power, what problems in this world that hasn't been touched or hasn't been solved can I go solve it by myself? So I can see a world where there's going to be more entrepreneurs, more
Mhm.
people building things, more people solving for things in their own way, in their own personalized way. And companies, maybe they look at all these individual entrepreneurs and they start consolidating. It becomes PE firm to the max, where they're looking at all these individuals and go, oh, I can kind of combine these together and formulate companies. So companies become a formulation of individual entrepreneurs that come together to create solutions. Who knows? Because all I know is my thought of a 4-year university, a 2-year grad program, a 9 to 5 job, a desk, a computer, that entire framework, I think, has to be turned on its head because of AI, because of technology, because of everything that's happening, this displacement of workforces. All of these things are going to force us to rethink everything. So there could be a world where every one of us are our own entrepreneurs.
It does kind of take us back to the economy 2.0 conversation
Right.
of the way
Right.
people make money
That's right.
is changing on such a drastic level through TikTok and creators and all that kind of stuff. But is it slowly migrating into the corporate world in a different way with AI?
Yeah.
Or will it?
Yeah. I think so.
The last thing I was thinking, Greg, just to have you take us through, and maybe you and Jeet have done this before, but when you're setting up an engineering team to think about solving a problem and you set up this whole concept of entropy, can you talk us through that conversation? Just give us like a run through of that context so that we can learn from how you do that.
Um, sure, just at a high level. So when we have a team focused on, let's say, developing a product, basically we start with the objectives. What does this product have to do? And so those define problems that you're trying to solve. It needs to function in this way, be usable in this way. It has to have these fit within these cost constraints. All of those are problems to be solved. And as engineers, we are identifying solutions to those problems, but every solution will also introduce its own problems. To give you an example, we might want a product that is of a particular color, right? So an engineer might have a couple of choices. So let's say they're making it out of plastic. They can form the part and they can paint it. Great. Very, very simple solution, straightforward. A lot of knowledge about painting. But painted plastic is now very difficult to recycle. So now you've introduced a problem where the material cannot be as easily reused. If that is acceptable, you move forward. But if one of your objectives, let's say there's a higher corporate objective of making more environmentally friendly products, you want to choose a different solution, like molded in color. But that introduces its own problems. You might not be able to get the finish that you want if you do molded in color. So in engineering, there's all these trade-offs that you're making to solve problems, but every choice will bring its own problems. And I like to remind my team just to be thinking at a high level that there's a kind of a rule of thumb. Every solution brings at least two problems. So be aware that there are multiple problems that can be introduced. Be aware of that. Look for those problems. Understand what they are. It may be okay to proceed if those new problems are more acceptable than the problem that you're trying to solve. But be aware that there will always be some cascading, some follow-on issue, some problem that will need to be addressed.
Hmm. Wise words.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right.
All right, guys.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you. Appreciate it. Thank you,
You.
Tracy.
Yeah, this was fun.